Hello and welcome to Kenty Primetime. I'm Paul Kent, obviously coming to you once again with the latest ins and outs of rugby league and what's going on in this great game of ours. Joined once again by Johnny Elias. Johnny,
great to be here. Episode 3, Paul.
Episode 3.
Look at the bloke to my left.
Who'd have thought we'd have made it that far? And
Sure.
we've got our special guest here, Matt Nable, Australia's preeminent actor.
How you going, boys? Great to see
He's
you,
a
Kenny.
favourite of ours, Paul.
Yeah, great to see you
Favourite
too, Johnny.
of
So
ours.
excited.
Yeah, great to be here, boys. Really happy to be here.
Thank you.
Mate, really appreciate you coming in. So, Matt, what we're going to do, we're just going to sit down. We're going to talk a bit of footy. A lot of people probably don't know. A lot of your sort of wider audience would not know that you've got a pretty storied career in rugby league, actually. Like, you've got a great background in the game, you and your family. Yeah. You've been part of the game all your life.
Yeah, we have. You know, it's been involved in rugby league for a very, very long time. My father was involved heavily at Manly, and then both two of my brothers played. So yeah, a real connection through rugby league. You know, one of the earliest entries into rugby league here was moving to Manly, and my old man had been in the army with Bozo. So you know, that was. You know, that there was a really, really significant sort of entry into rugby league in Australia. So, yeah, it's always been part of our life.
Yeah. I'll tell you a story, actually. So your father, Dave, was a trainer at Manly for many, many years. And it got to the point where he also, Bozo was the Australian coach as well, took your father away as the trainer for the Australian team, Kangaroo Tours. Johnny Lewis, can I tell this? I don't know if you know this. Do you know the story? I don't know if you know this one.
No, probably
I'll tell the story quickly anyway. So Bozo takes Johnny Lewis away on the 1990 Kangaroo Tour, okay? And Johnny Lewis, the boxing trainer, obviously. And over there, Johnny he's there to take all the injured players through pad work and just essentially just talk to them away from the training paddock and just keep them switched on, see? Anyway, so Boz has your old man there, Johnny there. They become great friends.
Yep, very close.
Very close mates. And after that 1990 Kangaroo Tour, your father says to Johnny, mate, John, why don't you come to Manly and watch a game? And Johnny's like, oh, mate, I'd love that. Off he goes. Anyway, so they're sitting there at Manly one day. I can't remember who they were playing. And Johnny told me their story. Yeah. He said he's sitting there watching your old man and they're just watching reserve grade before your dad's got to go and get busy with Bozo and the first grade players. And Johnny goes, and Paul, mate, next minute this blue, it just erupts on the footy field. You know where I'm going now, don't you?
Yeah, I do remember that.
So the fight starts on the footy field,
okay.
and next minute this Manly bloke knocked 3 or 4 I think it was Balmain they were playing.
Yeah.
Was it Balmain?
West.
3 or 4 West blokes over, and Johnny goes, mate, Dave, look at this bloke. Geez, he can throw him. Dave goes, that's my young bloke, Matt.
That was a different game back then.
It was a different game.
I didn't get Sinbin nothing.
Part of the game. I think it was part of the game back then.
Johnny wanted off your contract. Now you get 6 weeks.
I actually think the guy who initially started it, he was the one who ended up going to the sin bin. I got a tap on the wrist. That was it. Very different game.
Oh, the good old days.
They were.
There's always fisticuffs on the field back then, Paulie.
Yeah, all right. So let's just have a quick tour after the first weekend. Nabes, we're obviously going to have a chat to you about what you've done and your sort of thoughts on your career and how you've sort of got to where you are today. You're the voice of Fox Sports Rugby League. Everybody sort of gets a little bit sort of spine tingly when you do. Give us a here we go. Come on.
Here we go.
Oh, it's very good. Oh.
So, but we'll get to that. But we just want to have a quick chat about the footy because we've got through the first round. I want to hear your thoughts too, Nates, because I do value your opinion on the footy.
Yeah.
Big improvers, Johnny. Who did you see as the big improvers after round one? Who do you think will be the big improvers after round one? Anyone you can see a real upside that we haven't identified yet?
I think they're all going to improve, Paul, but I really, look, in all probability, if a team wins high possession, got a high kicking game, short kicking game and a long kicking game, and they win the 50-50 calls and they're favoured to win the game, they usually win the game. But if you don't, and they do the fundamentals right, the big improvers for me are going to be Newcastle. People may laugh. I'm going to explain why. Field position wasn't there. They didn't have a short, high or long kicking game. So I watched the game closely. They lost the captain's challenge after 5 minutes, and I thought it was a bad call. So you're playing under pressure for the next 75 minutes. Possession in the first half was only 57% for them. Second half, I think it creeped to about 70.
Completion, you mean?
Completion. Possession, completion, same. Yeah. It was about 77% in the second half. Collectively, I've watched them in attack. It was non-existent, really, to be honest. But they united in defence, and that's what got them through.
Yeah.
If they can just get their kicking game right, I think they're going to be the big improvers, just in my opinion, because I watch the game. I watch it closely.
Yeah.
I watch every game, Paul.
They'll be on their toes this week too with the news this week that Dylan Brown's heading their way. And look, you said you watched the game closely.
I do. I love it.
Look, little bit of a whisper's come my way. Is it true? Firstly, where do you watch the game? Because the second part is incumbent on the first part. The second part I hear is you like to watch the game with the volume down.
Yes, you've done your research, Paul. Yes, I do, and I've got a reason for that. Look, late last year, I was watching games, and there's pay TV, and there's free to air. So I went to half time for the same game.
Yep.
Not a word of a lie. They both come up with different commentary.
Yep.
And it just gave me the shits. It's like I'm watching a different game. So I thought, if you want me on this show to give my personal opinion, I need to watch what I see. I need to give an opinion on what I see, not what I hear.
Yep.
And watch it with the volume down. I love it. It suits me just to the ground.
Do you ever watch anything with the volume down, Nabes?
I got special needs, Paul. I told you that.
No. Look, I actually enjoy. I'll watch quite a bit of the footy on the weekend. I'll watch as my kids are, the 20 and 18, the boys, and even the young girl, 15, they like it. So I'll watch as much as I can. But I'll be honest, at different stages, what you're hearing, when the colour commentary comes in, the guys who actually know what they're talking about, I'll actually listen to that a lot more than actually probably the play-by-play because of the insights they sort of give. And like I said, I've been involved in footy for a long time, but the actual people break down rugby league these days. I would be a bit clueless. I'm a bit of a neophyte with structure and all those types of things. I can identify what a good player is. I think everyone, with a bit of an idea can do that. But when sides are, when you can see the difference between the level of sides like Penrith with someone who's outside the top 8, obviously you can see the difference. But it'd be hard for me to pinpoint exactly what that is without just referring to Nathan Cleary or Isaiah Yeo, like how they're playing and how they're structured and how they execute. So the colour commentary for me is something that really helps.
You're pretty good mates with Ivan Cleary too, aren't you?
Yeah, really, really close with Ivan. Yeah.
Do you talk footy much with him? Sometimes you ask people to educate you on different things.
I've is I'll talk to. I was over in my joint just after Christmas. We had something over there and we talked about footy, but it was pretty general about. I did ask him about what he thought of next year, the sides that had improved, and he said the things that everyone is saying. That Brisbane will get a bounce from Michael Maguire and Souths with Wayne Bennett. Melbourne haven't lost anyone, so you look at those 4 sides. But he's a remarkably humble guy, and I would, I think more than anything, his success would be attributed to that, and also making a real level of honesty without having to, I guess, make it uncomfortable for young men. And I think that's why a couple of the reasons he's been so successful, but also I've been doing it for a long time. I mean, I remember going to the Roosters in 2004. He asked me to come down, and I just finished boxing at that point. So I went down and did the boxing and conditioning for the under-20s, and that was Flano. Yep. The reserve grade coach was Ivan, and Sticky was the first grade coach. So I've been around, for a long, long time. He was a young man as a coach. So I think there's, again, he's always been remarkably calm, humble, and unflappable. And I think that's, in the end, going through what he's had to go through at different stages, like he was let go by Penrith. He went to West Tigers, then he went back to Penrith again. It hasn't always been easy. I mean, there were times there where, the media gets on board and they say, well, he hasn't won a competition. He's the next Brian Smith. And I'm like, now he's won 4 in a row. Yeah. You know what I mean? So I think it's a testament to Ivan's disposition as much as anything to where he's at. So when he talks about it with me, again, it's just really general sort of stuff. Again, because I'd probably get lost in the minutiae of rugby league at the moment.
I wrote one of the first stories about Ivan when he came through as a player. And even then, his intelligence was apparent. The headline on the story, I still remember, was Ivan the Cerebral. Yeah. So, because he's so intelligent. And that was that back then. But there are some people who have been a little bit, look, I don't want to say surprised, But he went from being that coach, as you just alluded to, who he was putting that record together, and largely because he'd been at the Warriors, which were struggling to find a way to win. Okay, he did get them to a grand final.
2011.
Yeah, but they were struggling to find a way to sort of maintain consistency. They had that one good year, but they sort of didn't get up the following year. And as a club, they were historically inconsistent.
Yeah.
So then beyond that, though, he went from being the next Brian Smith, so to speak, for how many games he coached without winning a premiership.
Yeah.
Then all of a sudden he's put it all in place.
Yeah.
But you talk to people around who have played under him, and they've got no doubt that he's now getting the success that was always promised to be there.
Yeah, no, look, you can't win 4 comps without that, coming to fruition. So, like I said again, I think a lot of it comes down to Ives' ability to. His disposition, his ability to manage young men, I think that's a really.
Do you think that's what sets him apart? Because, like all the look, 4 premierships. Ivan at one day will be in the conversation now as one of the great coaches
of all time.
Okay,
yeah.
And with all the great coaches, everybody tries to break them down. We look at Wayne Bennett. We talk about Craig Bellamy. We go back to Jack Gibson, Warren Ryan, who never gets the credit he deserves for what he's done in the game. All the great coaches. When we start to try and break down Ivan, what was the key to his success? What do you think, as a mate of his, what would that be?
I just think a real an honesty. You know what I mean? I think that is what you see is what you get. Like I said, he's got a really, really good disposition for pressure.
Yeah.
You look at Nathan. I did a piece last year on Nathan and alluded to where that has all come from. Ive was the same, mate, unflappable, like an Iceman. Yeah. You know what I mean? And I think that that is carried over into, when he fronting the meter or when the pressure's on. He's been able to sort of shift it to the side and maintain where he needs to be. And I think that's a real look. Being an NRL coach is one of the most high pressure sort of jobs I think you could ever. I mean, you only have to lose 2 games and people start screaming. I mean, it'd be interesting to see what happens with Robbo this year if the Roosters don't perform like. Well, they've lost so many players. Where that noise starts to come from, and it's hard to shut out. And I think one of the great things about Ive, or one of his great strengths, has been able to do that. Not that it hasn't affected. I'm sure it's affected him at different stages, but he's like I said, he's got a wonderful disposition and honesty, and a real humbleness. Like Ive's a really humble bloke. I mean, coaches can sometimes. Their ego can get the best of them. We've seen it.
They keep scrapbooks. They keep hidden away.
Well, they think they put the air in football.
Yeah, he's a nice fellow. I've met him a few times.
Yeah. He's a champion.
Matty and Paul, can I ask you this? Other coaches and other clubs would say he's got the best nursery in the competition. Yeah. He's got a production line there, correct? He's got players coming through. And others will argue he's got 5 to 6 players that played together in junior league and won every game and won every premiership. So that does help.
Yeah, But John, he's the boss of that.
Yes, I know that. But he's brought players into the first team that have played with each other, that know each other.
Yeah.
Junior league.
There's truth in the fact that the nursery there has been brought on the way it has, and it facilitates
it does.
People coming through playing together in good sides. But if you talk about it's relative. They go, Ivan's had Isaiah Yeo and Nathan Cleary and Jerome Luai and Fisher Harris. Yes. Well, Jack Gibson had Arthur Beats and Ron Coote at the Eastern Suburbs. Yeah. He had Bunny Riley. He had Russell Fairfax. Then he went to Parramatta, and then he had Brett. So
it's
they're
true.
all great teams. Wayne Bennett had Brisbane. They're all great sides.
Yes. But I was just trying to say. You had them coming through the junior base.
Yeah, but you do very true about that, Johnny. See, the one thing about that, Ivan's in charge. Ivan puts the systems in place to help develop those players properly.
Oh, absolutely,
That's one thing. Yeah. The second thing which gives me the shits about a lot of clubs that complain about Penrith's junior nursery
I hate that.
Is, for example, the Roosters have got no junior nursery, all right? So you know what they did? They went over and they took over Central Coast, who have great juniors, essentially taking them out of Newcastle's clutches.
Okay.
But they went to the Central Coast, and now the Central Coast are actually called the Central Coast Roosters now. Okay, and they because the Roosters have put so much development in them. There's nothing stopping any club anywhere in the NRL. This all comes down to the clubs themselves. There's nothing stopping any club
Absolutely
to actually
correct.
go out to Western Division, Orange and Bathurst, and say, you know what, let's start pouring some money in here and try and get first crack at the kids to come through here to come to our club.
I totally agree.
The fact that Penrith's got a great catchment is one that they're lucky, but so have Newcastle, and
they're doing
Newcastle
something
are
about it.
capitalising on it,
They're
like
doing something
Penrith
about
are.
it. Yeah.
And there's Newcastle have had every opportunity in the last 15 years that Penrith have had, and have failed to capitalise on it, given the way they ran their club.
Yeah.
And they put it at one point. They actively reduced the emphasis they had on junior development, thinking that they would just be able to pick players up here because they didn't want to spend the money on it.
Yeah.
Penrith, to their credit, have spent money in that area.
Yeah.
They certainly have.
They've done well.
Yeah.
Take me out off to them.
Now, speaking of developing players, Dylan Brown.
Here we go.
We've talked about it all week. Everybody's talked about it all week. It's a fascination for the game. One week into the competition, he's announced he's leaving 5 years out early from his contract, 5 years early.
Yeah.
For a $13 million deal, which is the richest in rugby league. So basically, when you're looking for something that's got to just catch fire as a media story, this has all the elements.
Paul, I like the player. I think he's a great player. When he's really on, he's a superstar, okay? He plays straight and direct, and that's what you need from number 6. I just want to, look, are we talking about is he overpaid or underpaid? What happens if the salary cap doubles in 5 years' time? I'm just curious.
Well, he's got ratchet clauses in there. So the salary cap goes up 10%. His contract theoretically goes up 10%, although I will say they have put ceilings in on something. So if it goes up 20%, for example, his might not go up the full 20. It might go up, say, just 15. But it will continue to grow with the salary cap. So it's not like in 10 years' time, if he's still there, he's going to be on 2025 money.
Okay. And the people responsible for getting him there, is this a quick fix? Are they going to be there in 10 years' time, Paul?
Oh, very unlikely, but I don't think they anticipate that.
No,
I tell you what, though, getting him there will help them be there in 10 years' time.
Yeah, look, 10 years is such a long time. I heard yesterday, someone saying they were talking about, 2035 about what happens now. And I was like, well, I might not be here. But you look at that 10 years and I think the guy from the Cowboys, Jason Taumalolo, had a 10-year deal. And to a degree that's, been okay. But the one instance that has worked properly is Daly Cherry Evans.
Yeah.
But from that 10-year period, and this is the truth. Right? He won a premiership in 2011.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
He hasn't won one since then, right? So, has it done what they hoped it would to do, which was maybe to bring them a premiership?
But I don't know. Manly's failure to win a premiership is on.
No,
it's not.
That's what I'm saying.
Yeah.
I think that was a good signing. I think
great signing.
The Cherry Evans is a great 10-year signing.
So do I.
Taumalolo, I think Cowboys are really struggling with it now.
Yeah, I think maybe that's just age and
a forward. It's the impact.
It's
It's a different game. Being a forward, impact.
Totally.
Yeah, halfbacks don't get tackled as much, Paul. But yes, I can hear what you're saying.
But halfbacks break down too.
Yes,
a
I know.
lot of the great halfbacks, they generally retire because of injury.
Yeah, but they can prolong their career more than a forward, I think.
But also, you just said before, like he's got a 5-year contract at Parramatta that he's going to walk away from. Yeah. So the 10-year contract that he has at Newcastle, and people say, well, is it going to bear fruit? Well, I don't know. I mean, Dylan could go there and have success straight away, and in 3 years they might have a window to win a competition, and that might be enough. And then contracts these days aren't worth the paper they're written on. There are that many clauses that you can sort of exploit to get out or put in before you get there. So everyone's saying it's a 10-year contract.
Not even that. No.
Is it going to work? Well, it may never get to that.
He might just crack the shits with the coach and say, you know what, I'm out of here. Stop turning up to training.
And
they go, what choice have we got?
So I think there's a lot of, noise around the fact that it's a 10-year contract. But if you're drawing a line through what happens in rugby league these days, I don't think it's. What does that mean? What it does mean,
right.
10 years for Dylan Brown going to Newcastle is a sign that they are investing in him for success.
Yes.
And so for him. People saying there's going to be a heap of pressure on him, perhaps. I sort of look at that kid play and I don't think pressure really worries him that much, the way he sort of plays. So I think it can be a great success. Like I look at it and think this could really work.
10-year contract might actually be a 3-year contract because in 3 years' time you'll start to get an idea of how it's tracking.
Of course it is.
And if it's not, and as we know with clubs, if clubs start to sit down and think, hang on, we're paying this bloke top dollar.
Yeah.
and he's not really giving us what we expected. We brought him here hoping we could turn him from a 6 into a 7.
Yeah.
He hasn't really worked out as a 7. We're still going to have to go to market and find somebody to play 7, or they've got a kid coming through, hopefully, even better. But they might then say, you know what, mate, this is what clubs do.
Yeah.
Mate, listen, we've had a bit of a think. Why don't you go and have a look at the market, see if you can find anything? And if you can't, then, mate, you're more than welcome to go to England and play. Yeah. And if not, mate, you're probably just going to be playing State Cup for us next year, at which point the player's pride kicks in, and he says, well, stuff that, I'm not going to stay and play State Cup.
No,
so then he'll ask for an exit.
Oh,
and
just quickly, you two, is it a good signing, Matty?
I think
yes or no?
Yes, I do. I think it is a really good signing.
Yeah, I think it is.
Yeah, I do.
There we go.
I think he's a kid.
But will it last 10 years?
Look,
unlikely.
Unlikely. I mean, so many things can happen in 10 years.
So in 10 years' time, Johnny will have hosting his own Tonight Show.
Yes.
You'll be on a Penrith-like street just giving your third acceptance for an Academy Award.
Yeah,
so we don't know what's going to happen.
I'll be looking at the dates off the calendar.
I think the injuries, there's all sorts of things can happen. But look, in the short term, I think it's the investment they're getting. I think he's a long way from, not a long way, I think his best years are ahead of him. And because of the length of that contract, and if it works, then they'll be at Newcastle. So they'll all benefit from that.
And let's not forget Parramatta boys. They'll have a lot of money in their cap.
They will.
And they'll be on the market for a big name player.
Well,
and the whispers are, you got it for me, number 6 at West Tigers.
Galvin.
Yeah.
Or Luai.
No.
Luai can get out too if he wants.
Yeah, no.
They can all get out.
No, it'll be Galvin.
Get out.
Just ask Mitchell Moses, whoever he wants. Talking about asking the bloody the big name player of the team. That's where I reckon Wayne Bennett's gone. He's gone to Cody Walker. Everyone's talking about Lewis died. Who are you going to pick this week? He's picked Humphries. We know that. It wasn't his call. I'd say it'd be Cody Walker's call. He's gone to Cody. Who do you want at number 7? I have no doubt of that.
Yeah.
No doubt whatsoever.
Yeah. Yeah, and look, Lockie Galvin is, I heard Gus talking about him a couple of times and just sort of, he's a very, very good
he's a Parramatta junior, is that correct?
Yeah, he's a Parramatta junior. So maybe, look, he hasn't signed. Someone said, I read as well, he hasn't signed. I think in November he's off. So
November he can negotiate. So he's got this year and next year.
But, like the West Tigers, that gives the West Tigers, I think first 6 rounds you sort of get an idea of where these guys are this year. And then, and I don't know what happens, but like if they're doing well, then obviously West Tigers will make plans to try and sew him up. And, if the spirit's good and the vibe's good at that club, and they need that, they really, the game needs the West Tigers to crawl off the bottom and do something. It really does, because the expanse between the top sides and the bottom sides is getting, look, I look at 4 sides now. I look at Brisbane, Penrith, Melbourne, and then Manly and Canterbury.
Yep.
I don't think Cronulla can do anything, but I look at 3 sides: Brisbane, Melbourne, and Penrith, and I don't think there's a chance in the next 3 years that competition is going to be won by those 3 sides. I just don't see. Brisbane aren't losing people. Penrith are, like I said, got a core of 6 players who've been together for a long time. They've got a great nursery, and Ivan's a great coach. And then Melbourne haven't lost anyone. They're sort of still building. So
and got Utah Commandos, so they've actually got better.
They're 3 sides I look at. So the bottom sides to crawl off to make it interesting. Those sides the Gold Coast need to do well. West Tigers need to do well. St George need to do well. Like for the game to be really, really healthy. I mean, the one thing that you go all the way back to the 90s where they tried to draft, right? And there's all sorts of a stink was kicked up, and maybe it's not the right thing for the NRL, but that is a way to distribute the talent and make certain that it starts to turn over.
Yeah, I've been banging on about that lately. The interesting thing, I just keep hearing crickets from the NRL. It's like, look, if we don't even acknowledge that he said it, then we don't have to speak about it. But the fact is they need to start getting third-party money and exposing that, because the one consistency through the competition is that the teams that continue to be at the top of the ladder have got the most access to third-party money. And it's not disclosed to anybody other than each other, but the NRL condenses it,
Can I just quickly say this? And I want your opinion, you two. If I was to say this years ago, people think I got rocks in my head. Okay, it's only round 1, correct?
Yeah.
Are we looking at a separation already in this competition? Top 6, maybe the rest have no chance.
Well,
I know it's early days, but are we looking at something like that?
I think if you look at the way they played on the weekend, certainly the 3 most impressive performances I've seen in the first round were the 3 teams you just spoke about.
Yeah, and then Manly.
But then you throw Canberra's probably the only one outside of that you would throw in as an impressive performance. But you are like,
well,
I think there's a separation.
A bit of a read on the Raiders, this weekend against Brisbane.
Yeah,
but there's a definite
genuine. Yes,
there's a big space between, and that's why I'm sort of saying for rugby league. Look, and it's hard, right? Because the sides that are attracting players, there's something that you can't sort of, I guess the word is articulate, but it's called prestige, right? So sides like Eastern Suburbs, Penrith, Brisbane, Melbourne, there's an aura and a prestige around that. And Canterbury is starting to build that as well. So they have coaches that are highly regarded among coaches, highly regarded among players, because players talk about coaches and they go, well, he's no good, or he's no good, or it hasn't worked for me. But there's a core of coaches that are prestige. And what that does do is for the players that are building towards something, they want to go there. Yeah. Like it's like you can go to, look, if a player's going to West Tigers for a long period of time, say like Jerome Luai, and Jerome's won 4 premierships, so he's achieved a lot in the game. He'll go there and go, you know what, I can set my family up. I'm still in the West. Let's see what we can build with this. Yeah. You'll get those types of players who've had immense success already. What you're not going to be able to do at this point is get players that are, the next superstars that they are going to be looking to go to those sides where they can get the most success. And the people who identify from those sides have a lot of pull. They've got a lot of sway. I mean, you look at Eastern Suburbs, like they've lost a lot of players, but they've got a lot of money now. And there are still players under Trent Robinson and that system that will go, I'll go there.
It's interesting you say that, because you remember back in the 90s, like you played at Manly and South back in the 90s. Johnny, you were playing, about 94, whatever you played. Yeah. But the Raiders and the Broncos were like, they were like rock stars back then, weren't they? And whenever they turned up at a ground, like an away ground to play, there was just a different feeling when they walked into the ground, as opposed to every other team that walked into the ground. I still remember being a young bloke seeing like Mal Meninga walk in, and you just used to sit there and just go, I could be like, wow, look at him. You know what I mean? And then there'd be Laurie Daly next to him, there'd be Ricky Stewart and Brad Clyde, and then next time the Broncos would turn up and you got Alfie and you got Lazo, and you just sit there and just look at him and just think, mate, there was just a feeling that they were at another level.
Did you get any autographs, Paul?
No, I've never sort of been that type of character, John, to be honest.
But Sticky's got that aura about him as well. Like he can attract the right players, and for Canberra and Sticky, it's more along the lines of Sticky choosing who he wants to go there and who might fit into Canberra. You know what I mean? So, but I think there's a real, the sides that have been lingering at the bottom, for the game to be healthy, they need to. I
go back to junior development. They've got to really work on that. It's so important to them. It might take a couple of years, but that is number one.
Yeah. And look, the West Tigers got a massive nursery.
There you go. Thank you.
They really do.
So what's going on there? What's going on
out there? Young kids playing, and but it'd be interesting to see what happens this year with them. Like I was a mad Balmain fan as a kid. Yeah. You know what I mean? Like Benny.
Ciro.
Junior, Ciro, Blocker, Gary Jack, like outside Balmain had 5 players in the Australian team. Yeah. You know what I mean? Yeah. Like so, and my brother played a lot at Balmain, and then they merged with Western, and I always like West, so I'm really fond of the West Tigers. I hope they do well.
What happened with your career?
Everyone does.
What happened? Like you obviously you had dreams like all of us did at a certain
age. Yeah, look, I think I played in all those junior rep sides and played in this city rep sides and New South Wales rep sides. To be honest, I had played 8 first grade games, and most people who play 8 first grade games go on and play a lot more. So I got 8 opportunities and wasn't good enough to be, and that's fine. Like I knew that pretty early on. I was probably a better junior than what I was when I came over and played grade. And what I really struggled with, was turning up every week and playing. So I didn't have the mental toughness.
Oh, really?
No. The consistency, yeah.
No, I mean,
Well, what you just.
Well,
what was it, you weren't interested in playing, or
no, I enjoyed playing. What I struggled with,
you wanted
like,
to party.
No, it wasn't that as all. A creative. So I was a dreamer. So it was, being able to sort of get myself out of fantasy land and then into a situation was like, okay, I've got to really concentrate here and play. And the guys that I saw who really, really went on, who weren't, immensely talented, but played a lot of first grade. Well, they're obviously very talented to play first grade, but the guys who weren't, superstars, why they were able to play was they turned up every week. They were finishing a game on a Sunday afternoon, and then by Tuesday they're ready to play. I remember I lived on up the road from Brookvale Oval. I remember walking down to play at Brookvale Oval, going, "This is the last place I want to be. Want to be today." Oh. So, but I could play, or if I once a month I could get my head around.
When you're in the mood,
get up for it, and I'd play okay. So, I just don't think I had the mental, the mental strength or what was required mentally to do anything. And I wasn't a big kid, like I was playing lock and second row, and I think Bozo at the end of 1993, I'd had a year out in the centres, and he said, "I'll put the weight back on, and you're playing the second row," and it was Beaver, Nick Kossaff, Daniel Gardner, Owen Cunningham. I was like, it's time for me to leave. So I went out a couple of years at South and played with Johnny in 94 for half a season, and that was just an eye opener. That was a kid from the Northern Beaches coming over to Redfern at that. I used to come back and tell mates, "You got to listen to this." Like, it was
stolen cars.
Yeah, mate, it was crazy. I mean, one of the first days I got there at South, we're training at Redfern Oval, and Tricky had taken out a massage table and was selling, CDs on the massage table. I was like, "Where am I?"
It's a different world.
It was, yeah. So that was the deal, mate. Like I just didn't. I wasn't big enough. I obviously didn't have enough talent to stay there full time, and I did it mentally.
Mate, I love hearing that because you're honest about it.
Yeah, it's
I get players going through junior league and they come up to me and say the coach didn't like me. All that sort of rubbish. You know what I mean? But that honest assessment about yourself, it's great.
Well, I
love that.
Having a beer with Choc Watmow, who I love. This is last year or maybe 18 months ago, and having a beer, and I said, "Mate, I would have played a lot more first grade if I was better." Because he thought I was going to say something else.
Something else. If the coach like
yeah.
It's so honest. That is really
that's everybody's story, isn't it?
Yeah. Oh, well, everyone's got a story about why it never happened. But,
yes.
I knew pretty early on that, that's where it was. And
so where'd you go from there then?
Well, we grew up my whole man was a really handy boxer.
Yep.
And so I finished footy and went into boxing. But at that point, my younger brother, who's now passed, Aaron, he'd already won a national title at he was only 19. So he won fighter at the tournament. He was the best amateur in Australia at that point. He's one of the best we've had. And so I went into boxing with a really good foundation anyway, but then, I was sparring the best amateur in the country every second day. So I went from, a really good foundation to really good, really, really quickly. So, and was with Johnny for a little while. And then, mate, I struggled to get fights because I'd stopped a couple of guys really early on. And then because of my last name, and the noise around that being Aaron's brother, it was really difficult. And amateur boxing's relatively small in Australia. There's some really good fighters. So you get to a situation where you're fighting the elite guys very, very quickly. So I knocked around in that for about 5 or 6 years. And then the last year I fought was 2002 or 2003 at the Olympic trials with and I lost to a guy, Jamie Withers, who ended up winning the whole thing and was a really, really handy fighter. Was really unlucky not to go to the Olympics.
I know Jamie Withers, very good fighter.
Really, really good fighter. So
Jimmy Brown's young bloke.
He really good fighter. And at that point, that was 2003, and there was a bit of pressure on to maybe try and have a shot at the games in 2004. But again, like talking honestly, I didn't think I was ever going to beat Jamie.
Yeah.
And then I was also 31. We wanted to have kids. And I got out of boxing what I wanted to get out of it, which was to get tested. You know, no one would, like I said, had trouble getting fights, and the way to, okay, well, now you got to fight me if we enter this Olympic trial tournament. And I wanted to find out some things about myself, you know, at that level. And once I found out those things and did what I could do, that was enough for me to put it to bed, you know, like it was.
Do you put it to bed easily though?
I really enjoyed the competitive side of the actual fight, you know, like I really enjoyed that. The training, because I watched my brother train, right? Like, and he's one of the greatest trainers in the history of boxing. I didn't train like I just didn't train like that. I was like, I'm not doing that. Yeah. You know what I mean? So, again, there's probably something that would have held me back from, you know, like I said, that maybe the creative side or sort of slipping into, you know, fantasy that would have prohibited me from reaching possibly the potential and which was similar to rugby league. So, but on both of those things, I'm really glad that I had those experiences, you know, as a footballer.
You do
and
find
as a
out a bit about yourself, don't you?
You do.
you do, like, and they're questions that get answered.
You also find your limitations, which is important.
They're questions that you can't answer unless you've been put there, right? Because you either are or you are not. Like, people can say, mate, I'm courageous, I'm tough, and you get all those things, and then they can exhibit those things when things are going their way. When things aren't going your way, you don't get to make a choice. You either stand up or you will turn away. So it's not choices. You're either that way or you aren't. So I was prepared to go through it and go, if I turned away, I was like, oh, well, that's what I am.
And there's nothing worse, is there, than being in a spar or a fight where you think, this bloke's just better than me.
Oh, yeah.
He's hit me harder than I'm hitting him.
Maybe just a lot of people would ask the same question that played both sports. Well, what do you find harder, playing first grade rugby league or that's a team sport, or the one-on-one boxing?
Probably first grade rugby league.
Really?
Well, because of the, you know, and only the very small number of games that I played, I wasn't I just wasn't at the level that I needed to be comfortable and good at it.
Oh, okay.
Boxing, I never felt out of my depth, and was always really probably more confident in my ability as a fighter than I was as a rugby league player. So, yeah, I always felt playing rugby league, you know, at that level at least, I always felt like, do I really belong here? And that's the truth. And I was also probably overwhelmed by the, you know, growing up as a kid, you know, to play first grade, you got to be like superhuman. You know, so it was probably part of that as well, going, do I belong here? That's, you know, I remember playing Wally Lewis as a 20 or 19-year-old. I was playing for Manly, and Wally Lewis was playing, and we're playing the Gold Coast, and I was like, I don't really belong here. This is ridiculous. Do you know what I mean? So, and also there was
You're so honest. It's great.
there was a real social side to rugby league back then. So, you know, you get to. I remember playing a game. We played. You know, you get to go away, and we played Canberra down in Canberra, and this would have been 1991. And first grade one, Cliffy Lyons tore them apart, but the second grade and under 20s, you know, collectively lost by about 80 to 10, right? Yeah. If you got on the bus with us, you would have sworn we'd won Wembley. You know what I mean? Like there was
drive back. Yeah.
Do you know what I mean? It was the team. You were looking forward to that as much as you were, you know, the footy. So it was just a different era.
So I want to talk about your transition into acting as well, because obviously a lot of people associate you with that. But before you ended up the acting, just quickly, you did have a bit of a detour. Yeah, where you suddenly were flying around the world and living the life of a billionaire. So to speak.
Do you want to hear this? Come on,
just tell us.
Oh no, so I was involved with. I mean, there was a very popular podcast that came out by a guy called really good journalist Greg Barup for the Australian called Who the Hell is Hamish? So I got tied up with this guy Hamish, who you know he's in jail now. I think he got 16 years for what he did. But yeah, like I had a job to go to. I was actually going to do the strength and conditioning at Manly, and I was still, I think, knocking around boxing at the time. And I met him, and he said, "No, come and work for me." And I was on a contract, and he said, "Yeah, there'll be a lot of international travel." And I was not skeptical because I'd seen the level of wealth that he was exhibiting. I was like, well, and I don't know anything about trading or finance, or I still don't. You know, I don't know $1 billion from $1 million. So I just took it at face value, and yeah, he had me on. Yeah. Gulfstream jets, G4s. I didn't know what any of that meant, but you know, I'm usually flying economy and you know Jetstar. So, I was flying around, the world in these private jets, and
Wow.
it was a surreal
Living the life of a billionaire.
Yeah, but
billionaire.
what it
all
was
built on a fraud.
fraud. It was a Ponzi scheme. So he was
Ponzi.
easiest way to sort of articulate it is robbing Peter to pay Paul. So you give me $1 million, you ask how it's going. He goes, mate, you're killing it. Here's 500 you've just made, and he just keeps the other 500. And you still think you got $1 million in there, and until he just drip feed you until it gets to a point where you go, well, I want the principal out, and he doesn't have it.
Did you have any idea it was a Ponzi scheme?
First time I heard a Ponzi scheme was when they explained to me what was going on.
Oh,
I
okay.
didn't know what it was. And I didn't know, like I said, I didn't know the value of, he told me he was a billionaire. Now that's preposterous. He wasn't even 30, right? So I just went, billionaire. I don't know how many millions that is, but that like a billion.
Probably should have been a red flag then.
Yeah, but I just didn't know, mate. And look, complicit to the point where he would tell me stories and I go, mate, that's bullshit.
Yeah.
Do you know what I mean? I was like, maybe he just tells a few porky pies and stuff like that. But the actual wealth, like he asked me to give him money. He goes, look, I'll buy you a house and you can pay me back, interest free. And I was like, I'm not doing that. You know what I mean? So, but I had no reason to disbelieve with my, I'm a neophyte when it comes to that sort of stuff. So what I was seeing, that was enough for me to go, well, that's legitimate because, mate, there were boats and planes and houses.
What you saw, not what you heard. Okay.
Yeah. So and when it all fell over, I was like, oh, well, all these lies that he'd been telling, obviously just part of another, a bigger part of who he was,
Do you visit him in jail, Matty?
Mate, no, I won't. I think I was on the podcast as, what did I call him? I call him a soft cock. So I'm not sure he's like mate.
You're not on the visitors list.
No, he's a clown, mate.
No Christmas cards, okay.
No, so let's talk us through then. Obviously, you spoke earlier. You're a dreamer. I know you're creative. I've known you for a lot of years, and you've always been a person who is a different thinker. You are creative. You like to write. You're a very good writer. It's taken you into the acting. I don't want to say, you should never say it surprises people how good you are, but you've acted with the very best actors in the world: Robert De Niro, Vin Diesel, those sorts of guys. Like how did all that transition?
All I wanted to be as a younger fella was a writer. From probably early high school. I thought, this is what I'd like to do creatively, and the entry into that was journalism. That was all that we had back then. And this is like the late 80s, and I didn't get enough marks in my HSC to do that, and so I went and did school teaching, which I pissed off pretty quickly. Then lived some life and just banked the life, and then I had written something over in England when I was playing over there, just a manuscript about an aging rugby league player. I came back from England, lived some more life, and thought, I got to 30, and this is really what happened. I got to 30, and I was working at a beer company. I was doing some stuff for the Roosters, and I thought internally, if this is what you do, this is all you're going to do, then you have underachieved. So, part of me ego based, like a healthy ego, where I was like, if this is all you're going to do, you're kidding. So I set myself a goal, 3 things that I wanted to do. I wanted to fight for in this Olympic trials thing. I wanted to learn an instrument and finish this manuscript. I did those 3 things inside of a year.
Wow.
And that really put me on a path. Was like, okay, I'm going to...
The manuscript was
a final winner in the
final
end.
winner.
So,
it was the final winner,
Yeah, so that,
Which got made into a movie.
Crazy to talk about. I just decided I'm going to put myself in it. Like, I've never been in a film set or anything like that. I'll preface this by saying...
Saved on cost.
Saves on cost,
but there were people
fees.
who knew me weren't encouraging me. Like, they were looking around going, mate, what is
he
he
doing? Yes.
Who does he think he is?
Thinks he's Sylvester Stallone riding Rocky.
And look, I've got had some mental health issues and was much later diagnosed with bipolar 2, which is very real. And so at that point, during that period, I was in episodes of mania. So you're not looking at the outside properly. Yep. You're not in your reality. So you're just taking risks. Well, there weren't real risks, and I wasn't going to die or anything. I just thought I'd have a shot at it. We did the movie. My performance was good enough that it just good enough that it wasn't rubbished. The movie came out, and very, very quickly after that, I got a call from a casting director saying they're looking for the lead in this pilot over in America. Can you go on tape? I didn't know what that meant.
Yeah.
So I didn't audition or anything. So I had to go to this place and audition. Get a phone call the very next day, say they're going to fly you over and test. I didn't know what that meant either, but I was on a plane on the Monday. I went and auditioned in front of the studio and the network, and then I'm flying back and they go, "You've got it."
Well, what's that like? So we see on television or movies or whatever, when somebody auditions, they walk into a room and there's a few people sitting behind a desk and they say, okay, and then all of a sudden the actor just has to drop into this generally a highly emotional scene.
Yeah.
And basically you got, 30 seconds a minute? Like, what's the reality of how you audition?
Oh, it's very different now because you go on tape and you can craft it yourself and you can take
it becomes
your time.
A full production.
Back in the day when you were in the room, and I did lots of that, where you're in the room with all the executives or the casting director, might be the director as well. Nerve-wracking, and for me particularly, because I was like, I am a fraud. Yeah. I don't deserve to be here.
Did you feel vulnerable in that
area?
Like,
when I started, I was just like, when was someone just going to go, mate, this is
You're
up?
out. Yeah.
Like, you got no business being here. So I had to deal with that for years. And then, you get experience and years pass by and you go, okay, well, I actually understand the craft of this. Well, I've got my own processes that get me by. And I will say this, to a large degree, the reason I was cast to work in America quickly wasn't through talent. It was a look. You know what I mean? I'll tell you a story, and this is the truth. I worked on this thing called Riddick with David Toohey's the director, and Vin Diesel and Batista. And so I was number 2 on the call sheet, which is Vin Diesel, then me. So a really big role. Anyway, I was over in America doing another little film, and they asked me to come in and audition. I'm not joking. I was in there 5 minutes. And I walked. I didn't think about it. I was back in Australia doing Bikie Wars. And they came back to me and said, look, the director and Vin really liked your audition. I thought it was a joke. I was like, I can't even remember what I did. Yeah. They said they want you to go and do another audition and see. So I went and did this audition. I got it. Cut to months later, at the end of the film, I said to the director goes, do you know why you got the role? And I was like, the audition? And he goes, no. He goes, no. He sort of made a joke. He goes, no. He said, you got the role because Vin saw you, and he goes, that's a guy with pain in his eyes. Wow. That's as simple and ridiculous as it was.
You know what, though? Steve McQueen talked about acting. He said, acting's all in the eyes.
Yeah.
And
eyes don't lie.
You're a very understated actor, which I really like.
Yeah. Do you know where that comes from? Because I get lost and I'm like, just do nothing.
Keep it.
The best actors are the people who don't have a camera on them, right?
Yeah.
And they don't do anything. So I can be like, I've just bring it all the way
But it's
down.
true though. You act with your eyes. You can see that very clearly when you act, and that I reckon that's a real art too. Like that's sort of the last level you got to get to. That's like Jedi level. So
yeah. Well, look, I think also too, there's a very big part of acting, like the arts. You get people who can draw, people who can hear music and then play it. Yeah. Acting, there's a part of that is innate, and that's why you hear a bit of hyperbolic bullshit coming out of actors going, this is what I do and what I don't do. And for some of it's very, very, the processes are very real. But for some actors, they don't know why they can do it.
Yeah.
It's just there, right? So they go, well, I don't know. And so I've heard actors, I've been with actors, and I hear them talk about their what their process is and what. I'm like, mate, I've been with you. You're like, that's bullshit. You don't know why you can do it, but you can.
Yeah. Mate,
so, and that's okay to admit that. You know what I mean? It's like, go and ask someone why they can hear music.
It's almost a badge of honor, actually.
Yeah. Well, people who can actually tell a story. I got guys that I know, mate, that will never be able, haven't written books or, mate, they're the greatest story. Craig Hancock's one of the greatest storytellers I've ever heard.
Yeah.
Do you know what I mean?
Man the winger.
Yeah. And mate, that's innate. He's able to sit down, tell a story where everyone is like that. Or Johnny's the same way. Tell a story. So it's okay to say I don't know why. You just can. It's that's a part of the arts. It is.
Mate, because your background in league and of course boxing, I've seen you in a lot of roles. You gravitate towards like underbelly roles. Can you do like comedy? I just want to ask.
Look, I'm not sure.
Total different beast, isn't it?
face for comedy.
Yeah, I don't think so.
No.
But then again, you may. Just you may laugh.
I've done some things. I did Mr. In Between, which is a highly regarded show, and there's some real
brilliant.
comedy stuff I've done in there with Scotty Ryan, and a lot of that was just.
What are you comfortable with?
Ad-libbed. Look, these days, Johnny, I'm looking for things that you're not treading over the same ground again. You know what I mean? But those people who are funny, that's a real talent to be, that comedically gifted that way with timing, and that takes a long time to sort of get there. Again, those people are innately funny, but they also might not be funny off camera. It's a real art to comedy.
Bob Hope used to have six writers for him.
Yeah.
They reckon it wasn't a funny bone in his body, but he had delivery.
Yeah.
And he had 6 writers writing all the jokes for him.
Yeah.
And he had a memory where he could remember all the jokes, so he could call up a joke from 3 years past that fits the same situation he's in now, and everyone thought the guy was hilarious.
Yeah, yeah.
It's true. Robin Williams, off the cuff. How good was he?
So, I think that, like for me, I just look at opportunities where I'm doing something that I haven't, got, it's not trodden ground before. So, but look, the older you get, I'm 53, so the roles I'm not a lead, not now. I've done lead roles, but that's sort of gone. So you're looking at roles where you're stepping in and being a character, and can be really, really gratifying work. Yeah. So you sort of come in, do your thing, and step out. So I enjoy that. You know what I mean? And look, if I'm not on set, I'm writing. So I'm really lucky that I've got something else to sort of nourish me, and like I said, do all the stuff for Fox, which I love. That's all storytelling. You
talked about boxing earlier and talking about Aaron being one of the greatest fighters around. I remember Johnny Lewis saying to me when Aaron started to get serious about it, he said, Paul, this guy's like Thomas Hearns. He said he hits them. He said they stay hit. Johnny was adamant he was going to be Australia's first gold medalist at the Olympics. Unfortunately for Aaron, boxing sort of got to him like he can get to people, and the politics of boxing sort of steered him away. Yeah. But it's just to sort of bring up.
Yeah, Azza was a freakish sort of talent. You know what I mean? But the thing with Azza, which sort of worked against him when he got sick, he was a very anxious, nervous little boy.
Which I never knew that about him, Aaron. That didn't come out till
much later.
What boxing unearthed in him was a toughness and courage that, while he was sick, he's still fearful and anxious about dying, but he had this thing, mate, where he would never give in and was remarkably tough. And so it sort of worked against him, and he stayed alive as long as he did. But as a fighter, I remember Johnny saying, he'd won an Australian title, and mate, Costa at that point was at his best, and they would spar. They were hit-outs, they're not sparring sessions, they're proper hit-outs. Yeah, Aaron and Costa, and mate, he could go either way. That's how good he was. And Costa acknowledged that. Like Johnny. Remember Inside Sport, a Channel 10 show they used to have years ago, and I remember Johnny saying, if this kid, he's 19, continues on the path he's on, he'll be the best boxer we've ever produced. Right, so that was his potential. He gave it away after he didn't make the Olympic team, and I think he was always looking at turning pro, and it just never happened, mate.
Do you think the trauma of boxing and the pain you put yourself, did that in any way contribute to, for people who don't know, he got motor neurons disease?
Yeah.
Is there any sort of way that can be connected, or because it was it shocked everybody when we heard he was sick?
Look, I think there's, I'm really up to date and up to speed with, motor neuron disease and what some of the possible causes are, and he was in some high risk environments. There's a lot of suggestion in and around fungus and algae and grass. He was a greenkeeper, so they were irrigating water out of Manly Dam where there's a cluster of motor neuron disease, so that could have kicked it off. But there's also immense data suggests that elite athletes who are disproportionately getting MND, that perhaps training to a level that is so extreme can trigger something and set something off. Okay. There is some data and information in around head trauma. But if it was head trauma specifically, then you'd have a lot more boxers with MND.
Yeah.
You know what I mean, or combat sports guys with MND. So, but there is definitely, I was talking to Rebecca Danaher, who I'm really friendly with, and she's Neil Danaher's daughter, and she heads up Fight MND. They do the big freeze, which we're doing something with the NRL this year. And I asked her, and she said, elite athletes. She said, there's something there that is so disproportionate with people getting it, that there's got to be something there. And it's it's just not a rare disease anymore. It is 1 in 200 people.
It's frightening to believe, actually.
It is 1 in 200,
and no cure. So in 2025, the money that governments spend to gain political favour or leverage or whatever, to have a disease that's no cure or no hope of something that can stop it in its tracks is not acceptable.
Yeah, it's frightening that they can't actually even slow it down.
Nothing. I mean, there's some drugs there that maybe put the brakes on for specific cases. 10% of it is genetic, and there's some really, really encouraging research and trials into maybe being able to stop that happening. But sporadic MND at the moment is, as it was gone in 20 months. And when I say, what it did to him, he fought to the end. The only thing that he could move were his eyebrows. So, that's inside 20 months. You wouldn't wish that upon anyone.
Yeah, I remember seeing Aaron when we were down in Melbourne one day, and he came out with us, and at the time it was just in his throat. He couldn't talk. It was only a couple of months later I saw him. But if you hadn't known he had anything then
no, you wouldn't have known.
You wouldn't have known a thing unless you asked him to speak.
Yeah.
3 months later, it was very clear that it had gone right through his body. He walked with a fractured sort of gait, and it was clear how quickly it was getting him.
Yeah, it was frightening how fast it all happened, and from the family's point of view, because the last 6 months he was at home downstairs in bed. That felt like an eternity because. Day after day after day, you were seeing him deteriorate, but he just fought so hard and was hanging on for so long. It was, he went into hospital in July. He died in the following March, and Professor Dominic Rowe said, I don't think he's going to get out of here. He shook his head, dusted himself off, and lasted another 6 months. So not everyone gets to that point, but we witnessed that. And look, the hard thing for us is, the cruelest thing it took for him was his ability to communicate. Right, so he couldn't tell you what he was feeling. Yeah, he couldn't. He couldn't text. He couldn't do anything. So, I stopped going to ask him. I'd come in and see him. I go, I just say, how you going? And fucking dumb question. I'd just be like, mate, what are you afraid of? Or what and hold his hand or whatever you could. But he couldn't talk. But that, he hung on because he's got 3 little boys. And every minute was precious. So, he'll never be forgotten at the way he fought, ever.
No. What are you doing with the NRL?
So I met with Pete, with Rebecca Danaher, and Pete's been wonderful. I said, this is an opportunity to maybe get some solidarity amongst the codes, and then met with Andrew and his team with Rebecca again. And so Fight MND will sort of run it with the infrastructure, so they'll come up with something different other than the big freeze, but we're in the middle now of trying to find a date. It'll be at Brookie, a Manly game, and what that activation will be. So, it'll start small. We're not the big freeze, but, it's about, building awareness. And look, Carl Webb passed away. Johnny Morris's dad passed away. Sam Burgess's dad passed away. There's another guy, David Chapman, Chapo, who lives in Orange, who played with Natty Wood. He might have been at Balmain with you, Chapo. Yeah. So Chapo's just been diagnosed with it. So it really touches the rugby league community. So for me, and it's been hard because there are moments I don't want to be an advocate because it's too soon, but
because it's only just been 12 months.
12 months last week. Yeah. But I've got to get out in front of it because it's important, because you need the awareness around it to build the advocacy, but also raise money so that it's flowing into the research, but also care for those who have it. So no doubt there'll be plenty of publicity leading into it. So I'll do a lot of that stuff. Yeah.
Beautiful. All right. But later this year at Brookvale, we just don't know when.
We don't know when. As soon as I find out with that, I'll do some press, widespread sort of press through the media, and everyone will get a really good
Good
heads
on
up
you,
on
mate.
when it's going to be. So, and look for Azza, I look, his approach to it was always when he'd be sitting down and I'd say to him, you must be pissed off, you must be angry, and he'd look at me and he'd go, and that was like, what can I do? What can I do? So I'll fight it.
Roll with
I'll
it.
fight it as much as I can. But Matty, it is what it is. So, but a horrible disease. Yeah, shit house.
Yeah.
All right, mate. I want to thank you for coming on.
It's a
really
pleasure, buddy.
Appreciate that, mate. Really good to see you again. We're going to have a few beers and a barbecue soon over your
We
place.
are. We're going to go around to my house and we'll get Johnny over there and get the old man and we'll get some people
Right.
around there for sure.
Yeah.
Paulie, when you told me he was coming on, I texted him and I said I was super excited. He sent a text and I'm going to get emotional here, but anyway, he sent a text and he said it was for both. He said, I pick and stick. And those just that, those 3 words, that just identifies the sort of bloke he is.
100%.
The upbringing, his character, and the way he's been brought up. Matty, we appreciate what you've done, mate.
We all have moments in our life, right?
Of course we do.
We all do. And some people in a situation where it's personified and it's magnified. But, when we have those moments, it's the people who hold our hands and lead us out of the dark into the light that matter, because we're all susceptible and regardless of what we show, we need people around us. You know
That's
what I
why
mean?
we
So
love you, mate.
never walk away.
Yeah,
That's why you're well loved.
And that's why I'm thankful you're here today,
Yeah.
mate. So there you are. Anyway, that's today's show. Thanks, Matty Nable, for coming in. Greg
pleasure.
Chappell, thank you for coming in. We'll see you all next week.
What's wrong with this top? Thank you.
See you guys.
That was great.
Pleasure, buddy.